Dr. HFY stepped off the transport ship and into the main hall of Hippocrates Prime. The medical station floated in neutral space, welcoming doctors from across the galaxy. His crystalline arms caught the light as he moved through the crowd. Each finger was perfectly shaped for the delicate work of surgery. He had spent 300 years learning his craft, and there was no one better at cutting into living tissue. Without causing damage, the hall buzzed with excitement. Doctors from dozens of worlds had come to share their latest discoveries. Near the registration desk, a group of tall Vorthan doctors discussed their new organ-growing techniques. Their pale blue skin glowed softly as they talked about regrowing entire hearts in just 5 days. HFY nodded with respect. The Vorthans had always been masters of biological science. Across the room, several Solari healers sat in a circle. On the floor, their large dark eyes were closed as they demonstrated their pain-sensing abilities. One of them placed a hand near a small injured creature in a cage. Without touching it, she could feel exactly where it hurt and what was wrong. The Solari had developed this gift over thousands of years. They could heal almost anything just by touching it and sharing their own life energy. The Kepler androids stood in a perfect line near the wall. Their metal bodies hummed quietly as they processed medical data. Each android could scan a patient and know everything wrong with them in less than a second. Their quantum computers could predict diseases before they even started. HFY had seen them diagnose conditions that other doctors missed completely. A soft chime rang through the hall. The conference was about to begin. HFY made his way to the main auditorium, passing displays of the latest medical equipment. Energy scalpels that could cut between cells without damaging them. Healing chambers that could mend bones in minutes. Nanomachines smaller than blood cells that could repair damage from the inside. The auditorium filled quickly. Over 2,000 of the galaxy's best doctors took their seats. Dr. Korthak, the conference director, stepped up to the speaking platform. His forearms gestured grandly as he welcomed everyone. Fellow healers, Korthak began, his voice carrying easily through the room. We gather today at the peak of medical science. Disease is nearly extinct in civilized space. Pain is a thing of the past. Death from injury is almost impossible with our advanced techniques. The crowd murmured approval. It was true. In the past 50 years, medical science had advanced beyond what anyone thought possible. The combination of Vorthan biology, Solari healing, and Kepler technology had created medical miracles. Today, we will see presentations on cellular regeneration, quantum healing, and bioharmonic surgery, Korthak continued. HFY's attention wandered as Korthak spoke. He was more interested in the technical presentations than in welcoming new species. Most new worlds had little to offer advanced galactic medicine. They usually had crude techniques that were thousands of years behind current science. Welcome the delegation from Earth, Korthak announced. A small group of beings walked onto the stage. HFY looked up with mild interest. The humans were bipedal, like many species, but smaller than most. Their skin was a pale pink color, and they had hair growing from their heads. They wore simple black clothing and carried what looked like primitive equipment cases. The lead human stepped forward. She was a female, middle-aged by human standards. Thank you for having us, she said in standard galactic. I am Dr. Sarah Chen. We are honored to learn from your advanced medical techniques. HFY noticed the other doctors in the audience. Many were looking at their data tablets or whispering to each other. The humans clearly had little to offer. Earth had only been contacted 3 years ago. Her technology was primitive. They still used metal tools for surgery instead of energy fields. They cut into patients with sharp blades. Some of their doctors even used their own hands to manipulate internal organs. Dr. Chen continued speaking. We have brought some examples of Earth medical techniques to share. We hope they might be of interest. One of the Vorthan doctors near HFY made a soft clicking sound that indicated amusement. What could they possibly show us? He whispered. They probably still believe in using plant extracts to treat disease. Dr. Chen's team began setting up their display. HFY was shocked at what he saw. Metal knives of various sizes, and pumps that looked like they belonged in a factory. bottles filled with colored liquids. Some kind of powered saw with a circular blade. It looked more like construction equipment than medical tools. "These are our surgical instruments, Doctor," Chen explained. "We use them for emergency procedures when advanced equipment is not available." The audience grew restless. Few doctors stood up to leave. This was clearly going to be a waste of time. Galactic medicine had moved far beyond crude physical intervention. Modern healing worked at the cellular and quantum levels. It was precise, painless, and elegant. Dr. Chen seemed to notice the audience's reaction, but continued anyway. "On Earth, we often work in difficult conditions. Wars, natural disasters, accidents far from medical facilities. We have learned to save lives using whatever tools we can find." HFY found himself curious despite his better judgment. The human doctor spoke with confidence, as if her primitive methods actually worked. But how could they? Without bioregeneration chambers, how could they regrow damaged tissue? Without harmonic healing, how could they eliminate pain? Without quantum diagnostics, how could they even know what was wrong with their patients? "We'd like to demonstrate a technique we call trauma surgery," Dr. Chen said. "It is designed to keep patients alive when they have severe injuries and no advanced medical support." The demonstration began with a holographic projection of a human body with multiple injuries. Dr. Chen began explaining how her people would treat each problem. She talked about stopping bleeding by applying pressure with cloth, about breathing air into damaged lungs using mouth-to-mouth contact, about pumping hearts by pushing on the chest with bare hands. The alien doctors watched in horror. These techniques seemed violent and invasive. They were the opposite of everything modern medicine stood for. Where was the elegance? Where was the precision? How could anyone survive such rough treatment? But Dr. Chen spoke with the authority of someone who had actually saved lives. She showed statistics about survival rates for various injuries. Numbers were surprisingly good, considering how primitive the methods were. As the presentation ended, the auditorium was quiet. The humans had shown techniques that worked, but they seemed so backward compared to galactic standards. Dr. Chen packed up her equipment as the audience began to file out. "Thank you for your attention," she said. "We look forward to learning from your advanced methods." HFY remained in his seat as the hall emptied. Something about the human presentation bothered him, not because it was bad, but because it was so different from everything he knew. The humans treated medicine like a battle. They fought against death and injury with whatever weapons they could find. It was crude, but there was something powerful about their determination. Little did he know that in just 2 days, he would see exactly how powerful human medicine could be. Dr. HFY was reviewing research notes in his quarters when the explosion hit. The massive blast threw him against the wall as the station shook violently. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power failed. Warning sirens began wailing. Throughout Hippocrates' prime, he pulled himself up, his crystalline arms ringing from the impact. Through his small window, he could see debris floating in space. Something had gone terribly wrong with the station's power core. Emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels. All medical personnel were ordered to report to the main medical bay immediately. HFY rushed through the corridors. The station's artificial gravity kept cutting in and out, making movement difficult.
Oh.
Other doctors were running in the same direction. A fourth doctor floated past him, pushed along by emergency jets built into her suit. The Kepler androids moved smoothly through the chaos, their metal feet magnetic enough to stick to the floor. When he reached the medical bay, HFY stopped in shock. The entire section was destroyed. Twisted metal and broken equipment filled what had been the galaxy's most advanced medical facility. The bioregeneration chambers were crushed. The harmonic healing rooms were torn open to space. Quantum diagnostic computers were scattered in pieces across the floor. Dr. Korthok stood in the wreckage, his forearms moving frantically as he tried to coordinate the response. The power core explosion sent debris through 12 levels, he announced to the gathering doctors. "We have casualties scattered throughout the station. The main medical bay is completely unusable." More doctors arrived every few minutes. HFY counted over 50 injured beings scattered around the area. Some were conscious and moaning in pain. Others lay still and silent. A young Altarian was partially buried under a fallen beam, his crystalline body showing deep cracks. A Sci-Fi healer sat against a wall, holding her head in her hands. Strange blue fluid leaked from between her fingers. The alien doctors stood around helplessly. Without their sophisticated equipment, they had no way to help the injured. Dr. Yithek, senior Vorthon physician, knelt beside one of the wounded. "I cannot activate cellular regeneration without the biochambers," he said. "The patient will die without immediate tissue repair." A Sci-Fi healer tried to approach another victim, but stopped after a few steps. "The harmonic fields are completely disrupted," she announced sadly. "I cannot sense their injuries properly. The environmental chaos is blocking my abilities." Kepler androids gathered around their damaged colleagues. Their quantum processors sparked and smoked. "Our diagnostic systems are offline," one of them reported in its mechanical voice. "We cannot properly assess patient conditions without quantum scanning capability." Dr. Korthak looked around at the destruction and the injured. His face showed the despair that all of them felt. Advanced galactic medicine required advanced galactic equipment. Without it, they were almost useless. That was when Dr. Sarah Chen pushed through the crowd. Founding doctors. She took one look at the scene and immediately dropped to her knees beside the nearest injured being. It was a Vorthon with a large piece of metal sticking out of his chest. Dark blue blood pooled around the wound. "What are you doing?" Dr. Yithik demanded. "You cannot help him without proper equipment." Dr. Chen ignored him. I'm all you're in so way there I'm in I we men we son all we have I mid I we and we they down but we mel bum lam to my I'm dom I'm we so would over to do more than us so cloth from her shirt and pressed it firmly against the bleeding wound around the metal fragment. "Marcus," she called to one of her human colleagues. "I need pressure bandages and a way to stabilize this penetrating object." Dr. Marcus Webb appeared with their primitive medical kit. He began pulling out rolls of white cloth and metal clips. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad but manageable," Chen replied. She was already working to stop the bleeding. The fragment missed the primary cardiac chamber by about 2 centimeters. "If we can stabilize him and control the hemorrhage, he should survive." The alien doctors watched in amazement as the humans began working. They had no scanning equipment, no harmonic healing, no bioregeneration technology, yet they moved with confidence and purpose. Dr. Webb knelt beside a Solari who was unconscious and barely breathing. He tilted her head back and opened her mouth. Then, to everyone's shock, he put his own mouth over hers and began breathing air directly into her lungs. "Stop!" a Solari healer cried out. "You are contaminating her respiratory system." "She's not breathing," Webb replied between breaths. "Dead. It's a lot more contaminated than anything I can give her." Across the area, Dr. Chen had moved to the young Altarian trapped under the beam. Several doctors had already declared him unsavable. Cracks in his crystalline body were spreading, and his natural structural integrity was failing. Chen examined the situation quickly. "I need 4 people to lift this beam," she announced. "And someone find me anything we can use to bind these fractures?" "It is hopeless," Dr. HFY said. "Once an Altarian's crystal matrix begins cascading failure, death is inevitable. There is no way to stop it." "Maybe there's no way to stop it with your methods," Chen replied. She was already wrapping metal wire around the patient's damaged limbs.
Ow!
"But I'm not using your methods." She worked quickly, binding the crystalline fractures with whatever materials she could find. Wire, cloth, even pieces of broken equipment. It looked crude and desperate, but somehow it was working. The spreading cracks began to slow, more human. Doctors arrived and spread out among the casualties. They worked with whatever they could find. Broken furniture became splints for fractured bones. Torn clothing became bandages for bleeding wounds. Emergency lighting provided enough illumination for surgery. Dr. Chen knelt beside a Kepler android whose power core was failing. She opened a panel in its chest and began rewiring connections with her bare hands. Did not understand the quantum matrices, but she understood that damaged circuits needed to be bypassed. You cannot repair a Kepler unit without quantum tools, one of the remaining functional androids stated. I'm not repairing it, Chen replied, her hands deep in the android's mechanical chest. I'm keeping it alive long enough for it to repair itself. The alien doctors began to realize something that frightened them. These primitive humans were succeeding where advanced galactic medicine had failed. They were saving lives that should have been impossible to save. Dr. HFY watched Dr. Chen work on patient after patient. She moved from one to the next with grim determination. When a Vorthan doctor told her that a particular injury was fatal, she ignored him and kept working. When equipment failed, she improvised with whatever was available. How are you doing this? He finally asked her. Chen looked up from where she was manually compressing a damaged organ to keep blood flowing. Her hands were covered in various types of alien blood. Her clothes were torn and dirty, but her eyes were focused and determined. On Earth, we don't have the luxury of perfect conditions, she said. We learn to save lives in wars, during disasters, in places where nothing worked properly. We learn to fight death with whatever we could find. She went back to her work, pressing rhythmically on the organ to keep her patient alive. Your medicine is more advanced than ours, she continued. But our medicine is meaner. Sometimes, mean wins. As the hours passed, the impossible became routine. Patients that should have died were stabilizing. Injuries that were supposed to be fatal were becoming manageable. The humans worked without stopping, refusing to accept that any patient was beyond help. Dr. HFY realized that everything he thought he knew about medicine was wrong. 6 hours had passed since the explosion. Dr. HFY stood in what used to be the medical bay, watching something that should have been impossible. All around him, patients who should have been dead were alive. Not just alive, but getting better. The young Altarian who had been crushed under the beam was sitting up. Dr. Chen had somehow stopped his crystal matrix from breaking apart completely. She had used metal wire, plastic strips, and even pieces of torn fabric to hold his fractured body together. It looked crude and ugly, but it worked. The cracks had stopped spreading. His natural healing was slowly repairing the damage. Dr. HFY asked, staring at the patient. How is he alive? Dr. Chen was washing alien blood off her hands in a bowl of recycled water. External structural support, she said simply. His crystal matrix was failing because the fractures were spreading faster than his body could repair them. So I gave him an external skeleton to hold everything in place while he healed. She pointed to the wire and fabric wrapped around the Altarian's limbs. It's not pretty, but it works. Sometimes medicine isn't about elegant solutions. Sometimes it's about stopping the problem long enough for the body to fix itself. Across the makeshift medical area, Dr. Marcus Webb was working on the Kepler android with the damaged power core. He had open panels all across its chest and back. Colorful wires ran between them like a spider web. The android's eyes glowed dimly, barely staying conscious. You cannot repair quantum processing systems with primitive tools, the other Kepler androids had told him repeatedly. I'm not repairing the quantum systems, Webb replied patiently. He connected another wire between two panels. I'm giving the damaged systems a way to route around the broken parts, like a detour around a collapsed bridge. The injured android's eyes suddenly brightened. Its voice became stronger. Power flow has increased by 47%, it announced. Quantum processors are functioning at 63% capacity. Webb smiled and patted the android on its metal shoulder. See, you don't always need to fix something perfectly. Sometimes you just need to fix it enough. Dr. HFY moved through the area, watching the humans work. Each case seemed impossible, yet somehow they made it work. A Vorthan doctor with a massive chest wound was breathing normally. Dr. Chen had opened his chest with a metal knife and manually repaired his damaged lung using nothing but thread and determination. "I watched her do it," Dr. Yithok whispered. To HFY, she cut him open like an animal. She sewed the lung tissue back together with her own hands. It should have killed him instantly. But the patient was not dead. He was stable and improving. Dr. Chen had somehow known exactly where to cut and how to repair the damage without any scanning equipment or harmonic guidance. The Silary healer, who had been unconscious, was now sitting up and talking. Dr. Webb had kept her breathing for over an hour using mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. When she finally started breathing on her own, he had moved on to the next patient without even waiting for thanks. She had massive neural trauma, one of the Silary healers explained to HFY. Bioharmonic field was completely disrupted. According to our medical knowledge, she should have suffered permanent brain damage within minutes, yet the patient showed no signs of brain damage. She was alert and responsive. Her memory was intact. Somehow, Webb's primitive technique had kept her brain alive during the critical period. Dr. HFY found Dr. Chen working on her most challenging case yet. A senior Vorthan physician had been caught directly in the explosion. Half of his body was severely burned. Multiple organs were damaged. His bioregeneration systems had shut down completely. This patient requires immediate cellular regeneration, Dr. Yithok had declared earlier. Without biochamber treatment, he will die within hours. That had been 4 hours ago. The patient was still alive. Dr. Chen had somehow improvised a life support system using spare parts from the wreckage. A broken environmental recycler pumped fluid through tubes into the patient's body. Emergency lighting provided heat to keep his temperature stable. She had even rigged up a monitoring system using damaged diagnostic equipment. "What are you doing to him?" HFY asked. "Buying time," Chen replied. She adjusted one of the tubes feeding into the patient's arm. "His body wants to heal itself, but it's too damaged to do it alone, so I'm giving it help. Extra fluid to replace what he's lost. Nutrients to feed the healing process. Warmth to keep his metabolism going." She pointed to the improvised monitors. "His vital signs are stabilizing. His body is starting to repair itself naturally, slower than your bioregeneration chambers. But it's working." HFY looked at the crude setup. Tubes and wires ran everywhere. Broken equipment hummed and sparked. It looked like something from a primitive factory, not a medical facility. Yet it was keeping a dying patient alive. "Your biochambers work faster," Chen continued, "but they need perfect power. It's perfect environment, perfect conditions. This setup works in disaster conditions. It's not elegant, but it's reliable." As if to prove her point, the emergency power flickered. The advanced alien equipment that was still working shut down temporarily. But Chen's improvised life support kept running. She had powered it with emergency batteries that could last for days. Dr. Webb appeared beside them, wiping sweat from his forehead. "How's our friend doing?" he asked. "Better," Chen replied. "His regeneration rate is increasing. I think he's going to make it." Webb nodded and moved on to check other patients. HFY noticed that the human doctors never seemed to rest. They moved from patient to patient constantly, checking, adjusting, fixing problems before they became critical. "How do you know what to do?" HFY asked Chen. "You have no diagnostic equipment, no quantum scanners, no harmonic sensors. How do you know what is wrong with patients from species you have never seen before?" Chen smiled tiredly. "Experience. Pain looks the same in every species. Bleeding works the same way. Breathing problems sound the same. Hearts all pump in similar patterns. Once you learn to recognize the signs, you can treat almost anyone." She showed him how to feel for a pulse in a Vorthan's neck, how to check if a Solari's eyes were responding to light properly, how to listen to breathing with nothing but your ears. "Your species developed amazing technology to see inside patients," she explained. "But we learned to read what the body tells us directly. Sometimes the old ways work just as well." By the 8th hour, word of the impossible saves had spread throughout the station. Alien doctors from other sections came to see what was happening. They found humans performing miracles with primitive tools. A young Altarian medical student approached Dr. HFY. "Teacher, is it true? Are the humans really saving patients that our medicine cannot help?" HFY looked around at the makeshift medical area. Patients who should have been dead were talking, eating, even walking around. The humans had accomplished something that violated everything he had been taught about medicine. "Yes," he said quietly. "They are." The student looked confused. "But how? Their methods are so primitive, so violent, so imprecise." Dr. HFY watched Dr. Chen check on the burned Vorthan patient. The man was definitely improving. His body was healing itself with the support of her crude but effective life support system. "I think," HFY said slowly, "that we have been thinking about medicine all wrong. The humans had shown them something disturbing and wonderful. Medicine was not about having perfect tools and perfect conditions. Medicine was about refusing to let patients die no matter what. It was about fighting death with whatever weapons you could find. And sometimes the primitive weapons worked better than the advanced ones." On the second day after the explosion, Dr. HFY found himself working alongside Dr. Chen. The burned Vorthan patient needed constant care, and Chen had asked for help monitoring his condition. HFY felt strange using his delicate crystalline fingers to check pulse rates and adjust crude tubes, but he was learning. "Tell me about Earth medicine," he said as they worked together. "How did your people develop these techniques?" Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. She checked the patients, breathing before answering. "We learned in the worst possible places," she said finally. "Wars, plagues, disasters, places where people were dying, and we had nothing but our hands to help them." She told him about Earth's history, about doctors who worked in battlefield hospitals while bombs exploded around them, about physicians who treated plague victims knowing they might catch the disease themselves, about medics who crawled through burning buildings to reach trapped victims. "We didn't develop medicine in clean laboratories," Chen explained. "We forged it in hell. Every technique we used was tested under the worst conditions imaginable." Dr. HFY tried to imagine it. Altarian medicine had developed in perfect crystal hospitals with unlimited resources. Vorthan healing grew from centuries of peaceful research. Even Kepler androids had been built in controlled factory environments. But humans had learned medicine while fighting for survival. Dr. Webb joined their conversation. His hands were dirty. "From working on another improvised life support system?" "The difference is philosophy," he said. "Your species treat medicine like a science. We treat it like a war." "A war?" HFY asked. "Against death," Webb replied. "Against disease. Against everything that tries to kill our patients. We don't just treat symptoms. We declare total war on whatever is trying to hurt people." Shun nodded. "When you see a patient who is 90% dead, you see someone who is probably going to die. When we see the same patient, we see someone who is still 10% alive, and we fight for that 10%. Over the next few hours, more alien doctors gathered to listen to the humans explain their methods. Dr. Chen told them about Earth's medical history, about diseases that killed millions until human doctors refused to accept defeat, about conditions that were considered fatal until someone found a way to fight them. "We had a disease called smallpox," she said. "Killed 300 million people in the 20th century alone. Every medical expert said it was impossible to eliminate, so we eliminated it anyway." She told them about polio, a disease that paralyzed children, about cancer, which grew inside people's bodies and killed them slowly, about heart disease, genetic disorders, and dozens of other conditions that human doctors had declared war against. "Your approach is different," Dr. Yithok observed. "Vorthan medicine seeks harmony with natural processes. We work with the body's own healing systems. And that's fine when the body can heal itself," Webb replied. "But what happens when the disease is stronger than the body? What happens when natural healing isn't enough?" He gestured to the burned Vorthan patient, who was slowly improving under Chen's care. His body wanted to die. His bioregeneration systems had shut down. Natural healing had failed, but we refused to let him die. A Solari healer spoke up. Our medicine focuses on spiritual balance. We believe that illness comes from disruption of the life force. When we restore harmony, the body heals itself. That works for many conditions, Chen agreed. But what about trauma? About accidents, explosions, violence? Sometimes there is no harmony to restore. Sometimes you have to fight the injury directly. Dr. HFY was beginning to understand. Each species had developed medicine based on their own nature and experience. Altarians sought precision because their crystal bodies required exact care. Orthans worked with natural processes because their biology responded well to gentle guidance. Solari focused on harmony because their empathic abilities let them sense spiritual disruption, but humans had developed their medicine in chaos. They had learned to save lives when everything was going wrong. Their techniques were designed for the worst possible situations. Show us, Dr. HFY said suddenly. Show us how human medicine works in practice. Dr. Chen looked around the makeshift medical area. You're seeing it right now? It's human medicine? Improvised, aggressive, refusing to give up. But Webb had an idea. Actually, we can show you something specific. Sarah, remember the Glasgow case study? Chen's eyes lit up. Perfect example. She turned to the gathered alien doctors. We're going to tell you about a real case from Earth. A human patient who should have died, but didn't. She described a young human male who had been in a massive accident. His body was crushed, his brain was severely damaged, and his heart had stopped beating. By every medical standard, he was dead. Any civilized species would have declared him deceased, Chen said. His life signs were gone. His brain activity was minimal. His body was broken beyond repair. What did you do? Asked a Kepler android. We refused to let him die, Webb answered. We pumped his heart by hand for 3 hours. We breathed for him when his lungs stopped working. We performed surgery to repair his broken body while other doctors manually kept his organs functioning. Chen continued the story. We replaced his blood when he lost too much. We shocked his heart back to life when it stopped. We operated on his brain while he was technically dead. We did everything we could think of, and some things we made up on the spot. The alien doctors listened in horror and fascination. The technique sounded violent and desperate. It violated every principle of elegant medical practice. The surgery took 18 hours, Webb said. Multiple teams of doctors working in shifts. We rebuilt his broken bones with metal plates. We reconnected severed nerves. We repaired damaged organs with artificial materials. And Dr. HFY asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. He lived, Chen said simply. Not only lived, but recovered completely. He went back to his normal life, had children, lived for another 40 years. The alien doctors sat in stunned silence. By their medical standards, the case should have been impossible. Yet the humans spoke of it as just another example of their approach to medicine. This is why your techniques work, Dr. HFY realized. You don't accept natural limits. You refuse to acknowledge that some things are impossible. Exactly. Chen said, we treat every patient like they can be saved, no matter how bad things look. Sometimes we're wrong and people die anyway. But sometimes we're right, and we save someone that everyone else had given up on. A young Vorthon medical student raised her hand. But how do you live with the failures? When patients die despite your efforts? Dr. Webb's expression grew serious. That's the hardest part of human medicine. Carry the weight of every patient we couldn't save. But we also carry the joy of every impossible save. The ones who lived when they should have died make all the pain worthwhile. Dr. Chen checked. On their patients again. All of them were improving steadily under human care. Your medicine is more advanced than ours, she told the gathered alien doctors. Your technology is amazing. Your understanding of biology is incredible. But there's one thing you're missing. What? Several voices asked at once. Rage, she said quietly. Rage against death. Rage against suffering. Rage against the idea that some patients can't be saved. Until you learn to be angry at death itself, you'll never understand human medicine. Dr. HFY thought about her words as the group dispersed. He looked at his own crystalline hands, designed for precision and delicacy. He had spent 300 years learning to be the perfect surgeon, but he had never learned to be angry at death, Maybe it was time to learn. 3 days after the explosion, rescue ships finally arrived at Hippocrates Prime. The entire galactic medical community watched as emergency teams brought new equipment and supplies, but they found something unexpected. The crisis was already over. Dr. HFY stood with the other alien doctors as the rescue coordinator made his report. Casualty count is far lower than expected, the coordinator announced. Most critically injured patients are stable and recovering. How did you manage this without proper medical equipment? Dr. Korthak gestured toward the human medical team. The humans from Earth saved them. They used techniques we had never seen before. The rescue coordinator looked confused. Earth? Primitive world that just joined the galactic community? But the evidence was clear. Patients who should have died were walking around. The burned Vorthon was sitting up and eating. The crushed Altarian was moving normally despite the crude bindings still wrapped around his crystal body. The damaged Kepler android was functioning at nearly full capacity. Word spread quickly through the galactic medical networks. Within hours, medical schools across dozens of worlds were receiving reports about the impossible saves at Hippocrates Prime. The story was always the same: primitive human techniques had succeeded where advanced galactic medicine had failed. Dr. HFY found himself in an emergency meeting of the Galactic Medical Council. Representatives from every major medical institution attended virtually. The topic was simple: what had happened at Hippocrates Prime, and what did it mean for galactic medicine? We need to understand these human techniques, declared Dr. Morpheus, the head of the Kepler Medical Institute. If they can save lives that our methods cannot, we must learn from them. Dr. Yithok spoke for the Vorthon medical establishment. Their methods are crude and violent, but they work in conditions where our elegant techniques fail. Perhaps there is wisdom in their approach. The Siluri representative was more cautious. Their philosophy disturbs our sense of harmony. They treat medicine like warfare. Is this truly the path we wish to follow? Dr. HFY stood up to address the council. As one of the doctors who had witnessed the humans work firsthand, his opinion carried weight. I have watched them save patients that we declared impossible to help, he said. Their methods may seem primitive, but they understand something that we have forgotten. He paused, choosing his words carefully. We have become dependent on perfect conditions, perfect equipment, perfect environment, perfect patients. But real medical emergencies don't happen in perfect conditions. They happen in the chaos of disasters, accidents, and wars. The council listened as he described what he had learned. How human doctors worked with whatever tools they could find. How they refused to give up on patients even when death seemed certain. How they had developed techniques that worked in the worst possible situations. They don't just treat disease, he concluded. They fight it. And sometimes, fighting wins. The debate continued for hours. Some council members argued that galactic medicine was already perfect and needed no changes. Others insisted that human techniques were too primitive to be useful. But more and more voices supported learning from the humans. Finally, Dr. Morpheus called for a formal decision. Should the Galactic Medical Council establish a program to study and integrate human medical techniques? The vote was close, but it passed. For the first time in galactic history, an advanced medical institution would study techniques from a primitive world. 6 months later, Dr. HFY walked through the corridors of the new Galactic Emergency Medical Center. The facility looked nothing like traditional alien medical buildings. Instead of elegant crystal chambers and harmonic healing rooms, it had rough metal tables and simple equipment designed to work in any conditions. Human doctors were teaching classes to alien medical students from across the galaxy. In one room, Dr. Chen demonstrated trauma surgery techniques to a group of Vorthon physicians. She used primitive metal tools to show them how to repair organs without bioregeneration chambers. The key is not to fix everything perfectly, she explained. The key is to fix enough to keep the patient alive while their body heals itself. In another room, Dr. Webb taught Kepler androids how to improvise medical equipment from spare parts. He showed them how to build life support systems using materials that could be found anywhere. Your quantum diagnostics are amazing when they work, he told them. But what happens when they break? You need backup methods that don't require advanced Technology. The most popular class was called Combat Medicine. It taught doctors how to work in disaster conditions, how to triage patients when resources were limited, and how to make life-or-death decisions quickly. Students came from every major medical school in the galaxy. Dr. HFY stopped to watch. A mixed group of alien students practice emergency procedures. A young Altarian was learning how to stop bleeding using simple pressure bandages. A Solari healer was practicing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. A Vorthan physician was learning how to improvise surgical tools from broken equipment. They looked awkward and uncomfortable. Their elegant training had not prepared them for such crude techniques, but they were learning. More importantly, they were learning to think differently about medicine. How do you feel about the changes? Dr. Chen asked, joining him in the observation area. Strange, HFY admitted. Spent 3 centuries learning precision and elegance. Now I'm learning to be rough and desperate. It's not about being rough, Chen corrected gently. It's about being effective. Sometimes elegant solutions work perfectly. Sometimes you need brute force. Good medicine uses whatever works. She pointed to the students practicing. Your species have amazing medical knowledge. Your technology is incredible. But you are missing the most important ingredient. Which is the refusal to quit, she said. The determination to keep fighting even when everything looks hopeless. We're not trying to replace your medicine. We're trying to make it stronger. Through the window, they could see another class starting. This one was different. Instead of humans teaching aliens, it was a mixed group. Alien doctors were teaching humans about bioregeneration and harmonic healing, while humans shared their emergency techniques. We're working, Chen observed. Your people are learning our methods, and we're learning yours. The combination is more powerful than either approach alone. Dr. HFY nodded. He had seen the results in recent medical reports. Survival rates for trauma patients had increased dramatically across the galaxy. Hospitals were reporting successful treatments for conditions that had previously been considered fatal. The old medicine was about healing in perfect conditions. He said, the new medicine is about healing in any conditions. The final graduation ceremony took place exactly 1 year after the explosion at Hippocrates Prime. Dr. Chen stood before an audience of over 5,000 doctors from across the galaxy. Behind her, a banner read Galactic Emergency Medical Training Center. When we came to your medical conference, she began, we were the primitive species with crude techniques. You were the advanced civilizations with perfect medicine. She gestured to the graduating class, which included doctors from dozens of worlds. Now we're all learning from each other. You've taught us about precision, elegance, and working with the body's natural healing. We've taught you about determination, improvisation, and refusing to accept defeat. Her voice grew stronger. Medicine isn't about having perfect tools in perfect conditions. Medicine is about saving lives when everything goes wrong. It's about fighting death with whatever weapons you can find. It's about never giving up on a patient as long as they're still breathing. She paused and looked out at the audience. Welcome to the medicine that refuses to lose. Class is now in session, and it will never end. As the ceremony concluded, Dr. HFY realized that everything had changed. The galaxy's doctors had learned something from the humans that they could never unlearn. Sometimes the primitive way was the better way. Sometimes fighting was better than accepting. Sometimes crude was better than elegant. Sometimes refusing. To quit was the most advanced technique of all. The galaxy would never practice medicine the same way again.